All right, we're going to get into a little slightly bit more advanced technique here. We're going to be combining transparency as well as, so we'll be printing the plate multiple times. And the other thing we're thinking about is using a little bit of selective wiping before we lay the paper down to remove some areas of ink. I think it'll give us a little bit deeper sense of atmospheric perspective, and we'll be less likely to have some accidental transfer of those darker colors where we didn't want them. So we're going to start out with, we've got our template all set to go. Trace the size of our plate. We've eliminated, the border areas so that we just keep our ink in this area to make it easier to handle, like we've done on some of our other plates. I've got some quinacridone red, I've got some phthalo blue, and I've got some transparent base. So we're going to start again with almost all transparent base. We don't really want much of the color in there. We're going to do a really sheer light color to start with, and so we'll spread out a little bit of the transparent base, and then I'm going to mix a little bit more red into my purple. The last one was still pretty blue. I want it to be a little more noticeably purple. Mix that in, and I'm just going to put a tiny dab in there. So we're going to keep it mostly transparent base, just a little bit of the color. So you can barely see the ink on there at all, even though it's a pretty even coverage of ink. Very, very thin layer, which is just fine. We want this to be a super light blue, blue violet. And then I will put my little frame back on there. See, I've already got some ink out here. So I'm going to get that back straight. Put on our transparency there, and we'll take that down so that we can hinge it out of the way again in between colors. Then we want to pull up our printing paper. Now at this point, if there's any areas you want absolutely white, we're going to do a little bit of selective wiping. So let's say we want some clouds in the sky. Let's just kind of make this, maybe it's a sea scene or something like that. So if there's any areas you want to keep bright white, let's get those cleaned out now. Maybe we, thinking of it as like water scene. So let's even do a little bit of maybe whites down in the foreground. Double check that your hands are clean. I think I will use a little baby wipe, just make sure my fingertips are clean before I handle the paper. And then we'll use our thin washi paper. I'm going to use the slightly textured side down again. I think that works pretty well. Get it squared up at the bottom edge, drop it lightly, and then once it's down, we'll just do kind of a gentle pressure there and see what we can transfer. Yeah, that's a nice soft blue. I think that's going to work pretty well. Now if you wanted a darker area, let's say we want there to be sort of the horizon of the, maybe we'll do hills actually. So I'm going to press a little bit harder. We're going to try to make some distant mountains that are a little bit darker than the sky, not too much darker, so they feel like they're still pretty far away. And then let's tape this down so that we can get that paper right in the same spot each time. A little bit of artist tape, and we'll hinge it to our plastic template. And gently lift that out of the way. So we've got a really light blue. I think that's a better blue than we got last time with our last demo. Alright, I'm just going to leave that residue on there. It gives us a little bit of idea where we need to lift those clouds out again if we want to. The other thing we can do is, instead of inking the whole block, if we know we don't want the sky to go any darker than we've already got it, maybe we just ink this bottom 2/3 next time. So I'm going to add a little bit more ink, and we'll spread that out with the same amount of transparent base that we already had. Keep turning it until the whole area is the same tone from edge to edge. And I think I will just kind of focus on this bottom 2/3 so that the sky doesn't get too dark. And then let's do a little bit more wiping away. So maybe we do want to kind of find another row of mountains, and maybe we just go a little bit lower than I think we went on our last one. And then do a little more, maybe like lift out the sky area again so that we don't get more ink there than we wanted. If we wanted a little bit more shadows in some of those clouds, you could even, intentionally put in a little bit more darks in some areas just for some, and then work back and forth, wiping away or adding more ink where you want it. You could even, do a little bit of lifting there. And maybe I go just even a little bit darker here in the foreground. I think I'm going to try to make some sort of water there, but I haven't decided yet for sure. All right, so let's, oh, I did it again, darn it. I forgot to peel back my border, but I guess that kind of protected it from getting ink. I'll just try to do it this way this time. Clean it up. It's been sliding around a little bit, so I want to try to realign it with my guidelines as close as I can. Maybe we just take this off and try to get it wiped clean before we do the next color. Drop the paper back down. We'll rub again the bottom portion. Oh, a little bit of a fold in there. I'm going to see if I can get that eased out. Make it a little bit better. Press a little bit harder down here. Maybe a few little, add to the little water area here. Okay, it's getting a little bit darker there. We could even burnish a little bit on the mountains. I don't want to rip through it again, so I'm going to get my burnishing sheet down. Hopefully I can still see enough to kind of suggest some shadows on those hills, and maybe darken the foreground a little bit more, or the midground I should say, with, and maybe darken some of the waves of the water. Okay. And then let's go pretty dark here. So I'm going to go more or less full strength purple. And I might decide to only add it in the very foreground. We need sort of a lake or something here. It's like an ocean. Mountain lake or something to, I'm going to just try to keep this pretty straight across. Take away some more of this so it's not printing again. And then if we want any little glistening waves on the water, let's try to lift it out so they're a little bit larger in the foreground, a little brighter, and then getting smaller as they get further back in space, so it feels like it's not quite so close to us back here. And maybe we even add a little suggestion of a boat or something out there. So maybe just dabbing on a little bit darker shade. It's a little out of focus. Further back in the distance, maybe there's a little fisherman out there or something. I don't think I'm going to bother cleaning up that little template, so I'm going to just wipe off the borders again here. This won't be as precise as it would have been using the picture frame technique, but it's a little faster. Okay. That's pretty goopy. I'm a little worried that is maybe too much ink on there. It might just squish out, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to lift it off that small of a mark. Actually, a paintbrush might work a little bit better on that one. Let me see if I have a little one handy. Keep it a little bit more soft focus. And we could maybe try to add, maybe there's a figure in the foreground too that's looking out at the fisherman. The border again, and make sure everything's kind of squared up as well as we can. Bring this down and burnish. Burnish that water even a little bit more. It's still a little bit grainy. Press a little bit harder with a piece of matte board here. Get more of that ink to transfer. Oh, I ripped through it again. Darn it. Pressing too hard. And that area was pretty wet. Yeah, I tore a little bit of the paper there. I was pressing too hard, and I may have had a little bit too much ink on there. You can see how glossy the ink is in those spots. If you've got way too much ink in the end, you can blot it after you pull the print too. So if you have a clean piece of just regular paper would work well. You can gently go over and just sop up the areas where the ink is really thick so that it dries a little bit faster. So yeah, that's where I tore right through the paper. I don't know that it might actually still be stuck on the, looks like it's stuck on the plate itself, so that would be a little bit harder to patch in. But we're getting a little bit more convincing sense of depth. So this had the most transparent base. Remembered we lifted out the clouds. Anywhere you want to keep pure white, you've got to wipe them off the plate so they don't accidentally get ink transferring there. And then we just added a little bit more of the intense ink to the same mixture of transparent base and re-rolled it 2 or 3 times in order to create a little bit more atmospheric depth there.